What is going on, BG Cast fam? How are all of you doing tonight? Thanks again for joining me for another BG Cast Wednesday live podcast. You know what's really funny, man? I was thinking of this saying earlier. Like right now, it's so fucking hot in Colorado, dude. Like it got really hot really quick. So I was saying that I was making this saying. I'm saying it is hotter than Satan's ass on a stainless steel chair in the seventh layer of hell here right now. It happened so fucking fast, guys. But nonetheless, let's get to our guest. This is somebody I have been talking with for a while, and I have to say I have designated him a real one. After hearing his story, it was such a profound awakening experience, and hearing some of his history and some of the research he's done, including some other stuff, that we might not get into tonight. But nonetheless, I find this man's story so profoundly interesting, and I think we can all learn and benefit from this. Especially when we're asking the bigger questions about this existence and, what is the overall underlying purpose of this all. So, guys, I want to gladly welcome to the show tonight my guest, David, aka the Lion. What is up, man?
Hey, good evening. How are
I am
you?
I am awesome, man. I am so stoked you're here. We've been talking about this for a couple weeks, and this is what I do this show for, man. Because like I was saying in my post earlier, like this is the show for our community. This is not. This is for people like you and I. To get on to discuss things, share knowledge, information. I'm not saying I don't want big guests. Like if they come, that's cool. But like at the same time, this is why I'm doing it, man. The
Well,
very
wait,
reason
are you saying I'm not a big guest?
you're the biggest guest yet, my friend. You're the biggest guest yet. Trust me on that, man. So, but I'm so happy you're here. Let's get into the gist, man. So, David, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and let's start diving into your NDE experience. I think from what you've told me, you got a pretty good glimpse of a lot of things that these aspects of our reality, a potential framework of how everything's working, man. So let's just dive right into it, man. Why don't you tell us a
I've,
little bit
I've
about
had more
yourself?
than a glimpse, but
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
yeah, but my name is David. I live in Port Richey, Florida, with my wife Sarah and our son Elijah, who's 12 years old. Sarah and I just celebrated our 25th anniversary.
Well, congratulations, you two. Hell yeah.
Thank you, and actually, I will be talking about that whole thing some more because it all plays in to this story. But I was a software engineer at Microsoft for 10 years. I worked in software diagnostics, which is basically you know um, Microsoft caters to some very large customers, right? U.S. government, banks, every big corporation, just about. And when these companies have issues with Microsoft products, like they want answers fast. They don't want like the tier three help support. They need like critical help quickly. So Microsoft has like high level support staff called escalation engineers that deal with these issues, and they actually will take the binary files from the crash reports and examine them manually to try to find a problem. And so what I did at Microsoft is I actually wrote an analysis engine that could like reassemble a virtual model of the CPU and memory map in real time based on that file, and then we could write automated analysis rules against it and run those to like basically automatically diagnose problems that before we needed an escalation engineer that we were paying six figures. So I guess technically I was trying to get some people out of their job, but in the end the joke was on me because I'm not there anymore. So but anyway, So
it sucks you can't win with governments and banks, man. It's always they
well, yeah.
go ahead.
That's okay. The thing that happens with these corporations, is they just use people, and it's much worse now than it was when I started at Microsoft in 2010. It was a different company. I mean, a lot of people, I'm sure, have their opinions about that company and their products, but it was a different company then. They were not trying to subvert the American system. They were greedy capitalists. They wanted to make good software. I worked with some amazing people there. None of them are there anymore. We're all gone. There's all the people that I admired aren't even there anymore. And I'm finishing up a contract there, and it feels like there's nobody left that knows how to run the company. To be honest, it's a different place now.
That's so crazy, man. And that's one thing too. I've been telling a lot of people, you kind of just laid it out. I've been telling people to have no expectations with anything at this point, just because of the way things have kind of, rolled downhill since COVID. I mean, like it seems that everything has, as far as anything from customer service to business practices and all that, it's all just seemed to roll downhill, man. But good on you for getting out of there. Seems like that was not the place for you.
I guess so. Ultimately, I'm figuring out what's next right now. So, so let's talk about that NDE experience. There's a lot of background that needs to go into this. So
we've got time, man. Go right ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So I was raised Christian. I would say like fairly conservative Baptist Christian. We lived in Pennsylvania for a while, went to a church there, and then moved to Hickory, North Carolina, where we attended a Southern Baptist church for a while. And that's also where I met my wife in high school. And then we, as often happens in that culture, we got married very young, right out of high school. Now, you could look at that and say, that was too young, but we're still here and we're happy. So, and there's a lot of people that can't say that. So, everything happens the way that it's supposed to. But we were attending, when we first got married, we were attending a church in Hickory called Mountain View Baptist Church. It was a Southern Baptist church. And we were young. We were basically kids, 20, 21, 22. And one of the church leaders there, the praise team leader, took a, what's the word I'm looking for? Inappropriate interest in my wife. He was like my age now, okay? And
why am I not surprised? Just keep going.
Yeah. And I mean, look, I've spent a long time coming to terms with what happened. Okay, so I mean, basically, you have a church leader using his position in the church, his position of trust, to subvert a married woman's how she would normally behave. Church leaders do this all the time. In fact, I've seen it so much.
They do.
And after a while, the guy's name was Michael Lindahl. He lives in, last I checked, I think he lives in Mooresville, North Carolina. Anyway, in case anyone cares. But so after, I guess this went on for a few months, right? And then, finally, Sarah started to come to her senses, and, she ended it and told me about it. Of course, that was quite a big deal. And I mean, it broke me. It destroyed me. I laid down on the floor for like 3 days and cried. And I felt like I was dying. I did die in a way. And that kind of, well, okay, to keep on going. So then the pastor of the church, Todd Smith, called us in for counseling. And he basically, like, his counseling basically was making me believe that, like, it was kind of my fault for not being the husband that I should have been or something. And
what the fuck?
Yeah, and that, you know, we needed to, like, keep this whole thing quiet, not tell people in the church about it, you know, because that could embarrass God. Yes.
Oh my God, dude! Absolutely. Wow. All right. Now, well, you know, I'm not surprised by the logic.
Oh yeah. Well. I mean, we'll come back to all this later.
For sure.
So that was, you know, again, I was 21. That was over 2 decades ago. But I mean, that experience, like, just destroyed me for years.
I can imagine.
I felt like I was unlovable. I felt like, you know, I didn't deserve anything good. I felt like if any woman gave me any attention at all, that, oh, she must be like an angel or something, because that's the only reason any woman would give me attention, obviously, you know, in my mind at the time. So, you know, I was I was gearing up towards my own disaster, which eventually did happen.
and man, let me tell you something, man. And like, I'm just gonna butt in real quick, and you can keep going. Like, I understand and empathize with what you went through, and it just blows my mind, you know, because adultery is a sin, and here we have a pastor, you know, promoting this, and basically, and then you have the other pastor being like, well, let's not embarrass God. Like, this is just, all right, keep going. Yeah.
So needless to say, like, this experience really kind of crushed my faith, right? Because, you know, when people talk to me about God and Jesus, the Bible, okay, I mean, not to get too far ahead, but I am an angel incarnated into a human body. I know God. And as a child, I knew who God was. So when people talk to me about Jesus and God, I have my own ideas about what that means. And I just, as a child, assumed that everyone else had the same ideas, right? I just assumed that everyone knew who God was. And if you claim to follow God, you know, there's certain things you do and certain things you don't do. And that's just not the case. You know, but yeah. So I, of course, became very angry with God, because the only impression of God that I was ever given was the God of this church that would do this. And so I just went through it in my head so many times, like, God, why would you do this in your own church? You must be an asshole if you exist at all. You're right. Like, that's
Dude,
yeah.
That's what I'm saying, man. Like, it's almost as if, like, a lot of these churches, and I theorize that there's some kind of hypnosis or something that goes on that's entailed there, because when we're looking, any person in their, you know, normal rational mind would hear what that pastor said, and kind of be like, you know, you can go fuck yourself, is basically where I would be on that.
As a naive child, though, you know, these people. I mean, I was a child. I was 21 years old, and certainly not, like, mentally an adult in my mind. I still feel like I was pretty much a child then. So yeah, I was taught to trust these people. So, you know, if the pastor tells you, you know, this is what you do, that's what you do. I mean, in that culture, that's just what you do, right? So yeah, it took me a while to get through that, and I started to hate God, and eventually, you know, I got to where I couldn't even step foot in a church, because it was just too. It brought back too many memories, and I hated being there, and you know, I didn't like the people, because when I would talk about the things that happened, you know, they would not take my side. They would get defensive and be like, oh, you know, it's just an isolated incident, you know, it's not a big deal, or you know, whatever, you know what I'm saying? Like, you run into a lot of that. No, you do run into a lot of that, I promise. And so, fast forward, I don't know, about 16, 17 years have gone by. I was working at Microsoft at the time. And, I'd always felt a strong pull to the occult, always, but I'd never really explored it. And I was so frustrated and just angry. And I was finally like, you know what? These people in the church, they're obviously lying about something. Maybe I should see what the other guy has to say. And
Yeah.
that may or may not have been a wise thing to do, but it's what I did. And so, yeah, I started exploring Satanism. I would call it LaVeyan Satanism, Anton LaVey. I started learning a lot about it. I bought my own copy of Anton LaVey's Satanic Bible. I read it cover to cover. He had some interesting insight in that book. He did. He made some good points, but obviously he was wrong about a lot of things too.
Mm-hmm.
And so I, as I was in this, I never changed like my character. Like I was reading these things, but I wasn't like, oh, I'm evil now. It's just like, oh, this is just the reality of the world that we live in, and I better learn how to survive here.
You were being objective, and like that's the one thing too I have to I commend you for, is that you were being objective. You were, when I was saying to you in our chat that we were having, you were being objective, and you were looking at things because you were searching for answers. You did not let any preconceived notions, any belief comfort zones inhibit you from doing that. And I mean, I commend you for that. And you still made the realization like, hey, this is not for me. This is,
yeah.
He was definitely wrong. Right. So yeah.
Well, again, everything happens for a reason, right? And, that time in my life, I definitely view it as part of my, let's call it my Jedi training, because so many people who are, on the side of light, let's say, know nothing about that world, nothing at all. And they think that if I just ignore it, if I pretend it's not there, it's not a problem. And that's just not true. It's not true at all. Like, everyone should know something about the darkness and how to at least how to protect yourself from it, because it's quite real. And yeah, I won't say more about that.
No. I agree with you. Since we're on the topic, the one thing I want to touch on, since we're kind of getting into that. So I remember you were telling me that you went on this forum for the Satanists, and let's get into that, because I think that's we're leading into that now, because based on what this experience you've told me, this is darkness inside of a quote unquote house of God. So let's kind of get into that a little bit further. I mean,
forum probably like, during my life, I kind of have felt like almost like this spy type, like I get into situations where I just learn about things that are happening that are really not good. And it's happened a lot of times, and this is just one example. And so I did get on one of their message board forums, and this was about 4-ish years ago. And what I found on there was that there were several people these were not objective people. These were committed, blood-drinking Satanists. They weren't shy about it. And they were also quite fond of bragging about the fact that they were priests, pastors, clergy. They were quite pleased with themselves about this. And I didn't think too much about it at first. But, well, actually, I'll just leave it there, because there's the story has to progress a little bit before I can talk about what comes next.
Absolutely. No. Take it as you will, my friend. Keep it on. Yeah.
So this is all around, I guess, spring, summer 2021 at this point. So the pandemic's in full swing. I had already started having some visions in 2020. The most stark vision that I had, I didn't know what to make of it. Again, I was an atheist. I didn't believe in God, so I didn't know what this was. I know now, but in September of 2020, I had this vision. I was in the shower. It was the first of these that I'd ever had, really, since I was a child, and I just saw everyone in the world connected by like these spiderweb threads. And a voice kind of told me that, this is social media connecting everyone. It's Facebook, it's Instagram, it's Twitter. And then it said to me, there's a computer virus for the human brain that's being spread by these algorithms. And then it said, you have it too. and then I'm like having this vision, and I can only just basically watch, and I can't do anything about it. It was quite frightening. I had the same vision several times over the next year. So then, fast forward to May of 2021, my wife Sarah got the vaccine. That's been a big issue for us. She's had a lot of side effects from it. I'll talk about that some more too. But one thing that came from that is I got COVID. As we know now, like the vaccine does indeed spread disease. So both my son and I got COVID, and I ended up going to the hospital. I had to go to the emergency room in Pineville, North Carolina, and that, and remember, I'm an atheist at this point. so that was the beginning of the end for me, I guess. So I go to the emergency room, and first of all, one of the nurses there, this big mean nurse, she's like, "Are you vaccinated?" And I was like, "No." And she's like, "Well, you're getting what you deserve then." I'm like, "Okay."
What the fuck?
Yes.
Like, what the fuck?
Yes. And so I felt pretty uneasy there.
Who the fuck says that? I mean, dude, this is like, just real quick, like this is how, I mean, even just guys, anybody who's listening right now, the viewers, just listen to this. These are people who are supposed to be looking out for our best interests, who have taken an oath to our health to help provide us with health care. And they literally just told this man he's getting what he deserved because he didn't get a vaccine. Like, keep going, man. This is, man, keep going.
So I spent one night in the emergency room, and then it was horrible, by the way. They didn't even have a real proper bed for me. It was awful. But so then the next day they moved me over to the actual hospital, and so that was a little bit better. The room was nicer. The bed was better. They assigned me a nurse there who was, I mean, I think she was literally an angel, like my lifeline during that stay. The only person there who was nice to me, and
I dig that.
Yeah, and then but also, they tried really hard. Like the director of medicine Skyped me in my room and was like, "Hey, are you going to get vaccinated?" And like, yeah.
The director of medicine Skype called you.
Yeah.
In your bed. All right, keep going. I'm sorry. I'm not at a loss for words. Keep going.
Yeah. So yeah.
Jeez, you can't make this shit up. You're not. You can't
No.
make this shit up. No.
This was like a horror movie for me. I mean, really, how many horror movies start with like somebody waking up in the hospital? They don't know if they're going to receive care. The world outside seems like it's going crazy. I mean, that's a horror movie, and I've lived through several horror movies actually, and this is just one of them. So while I was there, they gave me the PCR test. I had some PCR tests before, but all the other PCR tests, they would just like kind of gently swab your nose. No, these guys jammed it up there. And, if you've heard that the PCR tests have graphene nanobots on them. Yes. So what happened to me when I got home from the hospital, this is the beginning of my near-death experience. So the whole time I'm there, really, I'm confronted with the fact that I could die. Like, I might not see my family again ever. They were killing people, and I didn't know if they were going to kill me. They didn't. They gave me the correct protocol, which was azithromycin. But when I got home that night, I met the nanobots. I had this vision, and the AI computer virus that I had been warned about was in my head, and it was threatening me. It was like, "Hey, you're mine now. We're going to destroy you." And it even identified itself. It said that it was created by Google, and I could see them. It was like these little spidery things with this red glowing eye. And that's how it showed itself to me, And the next day, so I did have some friends that hooked me up with a doctor who prescribed me ivermectin.
Good.
So the very next day, I started on ivermectin, and I'm quite certain that killed, whatever that was. But the other thing that happened was, over the course of about the next month, because ivermectin kills parasites, right? And so I was probably riddled with parasites, as so many people are. And those parasites can affect our ability to reason. and so over the next month, as I was taking ivermectin, I started thinking a lot clearer. So I started thinking about, well, first of all the things that I had learned, because I started watching conspiracy theory videos, and I started learning about, all these cults that are like killing children and, drinking blood. And, people think that's imaginary. It's not. It's so real. It's so real.
No, it is.
And that, coupled with, what I had learned about the infiltrators in the church. And I'm just thinking, I'm like, okay, wait a second now. People like that are running the church, and I hate God. What if the reason I hate God is because people like that are running the church, and they misrepresented him to me? And I started having an existential crisis. I'm like, because I didn't know.
I would too, dude.
Yeah,
I would too. I don't blame you.
Yeah, and so eventually one night, I couldn't sleep. It was about 4 a.m, and I just kind of got up, sat up. I was having a lot of anxiety, and when you hear a certain voice, I don't know how I know who it is, but I do. Okay, and so I heard the voice of Jesus, and he's basically like, "What's wrong? What's bothering you?" And I was like, "Well, I'm really disturbed by, like, I don't know what to do. I don't want to be a Satanist, but I can't, go back. I've said too many things, done too many things." And he was just like, no, none of that matters. Just forget it. Just come back. And that was, I guess you could say, my awakening moment. And after that,
and you saw there was a different option and there was another way. I think that's fantastic.
Yes, because, well, I'll tell you. Okay, so then I had what I would call the near-death experience, and that was like, basically, God. Yeah, I met God, and he took me on like this tour of time and space. He showed me the creation. He showed me the crucifixion. He showed me many things. He answered every question I ever had. Why did this happen? Why did that happen? Why did such a bad thing happen to me? And basically the answer was, it's a shitty world and shitty things happen. And I'm sorry. Because basically, and I can deal with that. Honestly, I mean, that's some truth. And And, he told me so many other amazing things. Like, I asked him, why did you create man? And, basically he's like, well, I had all this power to create. I already knew what I would do with it. I wanted to see what someone else would do with it. So I made man in my image so that he could create. I just like making friends. Is what he said. And if that makes me bad, then I'm guilty. Like, um, and that's honestly, that's just
But
what
what you're saying has such spiritual significance, though. Like, I mean, that's essentially what we we all are, and I mean, it's cool it was relayed to you that way.
Yes. And we also talked about the crucifixion. Like, why, God, would you require a blood sacrifice of your own son? It's like, no, that wasn't me. That wasn't me that did that. That was the God of this world that did that. And we agreed to do it because that was the price we were willing to pay to get humanity back. And, people like to say, oh, Jesus is my savior. And he purchased our soul contracts from the God of this world. But there's something that people don't seem to understand. That does not free us to just do anything that we want. Okay. It's more like it just brings us back to the even playing field. Now our lives are our own to decide what we're going to do with. And we can still choose to do bad or good. We can choose to follow God, or we can choose to follow our own path. And, the blood of Jesus is not going to absolve you from harming people. If you do that intentionally, if that's your thing, no. Why would Jesus want anything to do with that? He wouldn't. So, yeah. So that's what I have to say about that.
No, that's so. I find the one thing I want to talk to you about. I just your whole description of the event. I mean, just as I was saying before, like there's just it's so it just showcases all of these spiritual principles that we discuss and that we talk about. How God and Christ are within us, and we are these subjective focal points of this divine consciousness that is part of this creation. I think you had a magnificent experience, man. I think I mean, even though it was based on some bad stuff and there was some bad instances that led up to it, I'm sure in some ways you're extremely grateful for where you are now.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, my life, I mean, as a child, to imagine that my life would become what it is. I mean, basically, my life has turned into like the ultimate superhero origin story. Like, the first time someone asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, I was like, Superman. And they're like, well, you can't be that. Well, maybe I can be. Or, in a fashion.
Yeah.
And, the other part of that near-death experience is, God told me who I am, which I am the incarnation of the archangel Samael, the angel of God's judgment. And, if you look back at religious literature, it's not always, that angel is not always represented well. And there's a reason for that. It's because he is the one who deals out God's judgment. And people don't like that. Nobody likes to be judged by God. So obviously they think he's a bad guy. He's not. He is the judge. He is the one who delivers God's judgment. And for most people, that's not a bad thing. God's judgment is merciful.
Mm-hmm.
But for some people, it is. And if you're God's enemy, he probably will look like the devil to you. because he's God. You're not going to mess with it. Okay, that's just the way it is.
100%. And I feel I'm picking up what you're putting down, David, because when we look at a lot of the especially in the contexts that Samael is presented in, it's always in a very dualistic context. It's always at a very black and white context, and both you and I know that everything services creation ultimately. Everything is part of the divine's plan or God's plan, and every single aspect. But no, man, I totally get what you're saying. Keep on going.
Yeah. So this is where things got weird, because in this vision, I was told, yes, Samael, he was a fallen angel at one time, but I repented, in a prior existence, repented and came back to God's service, and basically he wanted to be reborn without the memories of the bad things that he had done, and that was me. But here's the crazy thing. The crazy thing about that, okay, is a year later, I found the writings of a Gnostic prophet. Some people have heard of him, some haven't, named Samael Einvior. He was the prior incarnation of the Archangel Samael. He died 6 months before I would have been conceived. And
whoa, that's cool.
Yeah. So I found a website where they have his writings archived, and I just randomly started getting into these passages where he had all these prophecies written. And first of all, he wrote about what I just told you. Samael was a fallen angel who came back to God. He wrote about that. I remembered something that some guy wrote about. Like, I thought I was the only one who knew about that. So, like, it was starting to get into like never-ending story territory here. And so then, as I continue to read, and he's like, "Oh, in my next incarnation, he's going to come back, and he's actually going to be like the one who wields the sword of judgment on Judgment Day." And like, what? That can't be me.
I have a lot of responsibility ahead of me, it seems like.
Yeah. So I don't necessarily know what all that means or how all that plays out, but I can tell you that since that time, I've had many visions of what the future is going to be like, and a lot of the stuff that I saw, like, I didn't believe it myself when I saw it. It's too out there. But here we are in 2024, and I can tell you for a fact, like, we're pretty far along on what I would call the weirdest and best timeline. Like, there's some weird stuff that's going to go down.
I would agree.
But yeah. I mean,
yeah, man. No. You're good, man. No, and that's one thing I agree with you on. I do think right now, we are on the best timeline, and there have been things that have pointed to that, but we are going to see some weird shit. 100%. We're already kind of, starting to see some weird things, especially, with that thing I brought up with now the Department of the Defense has taken it upon themselves to serve every school lunch nationwide, every single grade. And I'm seeing that, and that's fucking strange, but nonetheless. But so as you were, you got this experience, you learned who you were, you learned that you were the incarnation of Samael, and you are here in this timeline to help permeate this place with the energy of the divine consciousness, which I think is fantastic. So let's kind of start diving back into a little what led you into that forum before with the Satanists in the church, because I remember you said you had some buildup we had to do with that.
Oh, well, I mean, I was just exploring, right? I was looking for, I don't know, I wanted to talk to people, I guess, or I don't know what I was looking for, but I was exploring, right? Like, I wanted to find out more. I wanted to see if there were people that I could find that I could relate to. Thank goodness there weren't any there.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
But I mean, I would say it was probably something like that. To be honest, that was like first time I got on there. It was probably 6 years ago. So I don't really remember it all that well. Some of that time in my life is kind of a fog. You know,
I can understand.
I was talking to my higher self not long ago, and he was like, you know, you shouldn't feel too bad. This is what he said to me. You shouldn't feel too bad about the things you did before you were conscious, because you were kind of like a retarded goldfish.
That's a great analogy, because that you can really kind of look back and you can be like, yeah, I was kind of a retarded.
Yeah. So, but you know, there is, like, you know, on the topic of weirdest and best timeline.
Yeah, let's hit that
well,
up. Let's hit. What kind of events, if you don't mind me asking, what kind of stuff did you see?
Well,
I
let me tell you the stuff just in my life that's happened, and then I can talk about the world stage.
mhm.
So, you know, I mentioned earlier that my wife got the vax and it affected her. So let's talk about that, okay? Because
Okay, for sure, yeah.
that's been the last 3 years of my life, really.
And I'm sorry that had to happen, man. I know a lot of people who were in similar situations that a significant other had to get it and they didn't, and I'm sorry that had to happen, man. But yeah, let's continue.
It is what it is, right? Like, here we are, we're still alive to talk about it. So, um, you know, I'll take it as it goes. But
I feel that. I feel
I'm
that.
happy to be where I am now. Okay, like if you'd asked me even a month ago, I'd still be pretty stressed out about it. But that's how fast things have started to move along lately.
Awesome.
So yeah, so the day my wife came home after getting the shot, she was a different person. She was a different person. Like, I don't know what happened, what it did, but like, she was cold. She was argumentative. It was just, she wasn't interested in the same things that she was interested in like the week before. And so I was quite disturbed about this. And after this went on for about 3 weeks, and you know, keep in mind, like at this time, you know, I'm an atheist myself. I'm not spiritual at all.
Hmm.
So I can barely keep my own soul safe, and here I am trying to save hers. And and this one night, I just found the words, and it was like, look, we've known each other for 25 years. Like this is, whatever the issue is, like it, it can't be worth just throwing all that away. Like, we have a deeper connection that is worth something that few people have, and we need to save it. And somehow that got through to her, and it's like it clicked. She was herself again for a little while, but what would happen is every 1 to 2 months, it was almost like she would go back to that mode where it's like she was a different person, and then she would forget everything that we talked about, and I'd have to say all the same things again, and like appeal to her humanity again, and eventually she would snap out of it. And this was the pattern for the last 3 years. um so about a year, so 2 years ago, 2022, it's the summer. Okay, so this was, so I'd had my awakening the summer before, and in the spring I had another kind of awakening. That's where I started to really like start to come into my power, and you know, start to understand a lot of higher truth. I started to have past life memories. I started to be contacted by beings from my past lives, um, and you know, I started learning about a lot of things. One of the things that I started learning about was Nikola Tesla and numerology. I just started barely delving into numerology at that point, but Nikola Tesla famously said, if you only understood the significance of 3, 6, and 9, you would have the keys to the universe. Well, that's kind of a vague statement. What does that mean? How can I understand the significance of these numbers and get the key to the universe? I really spent some time thinking about that. And fortunately, as a software engineer, I guess my mind is just well equipped to handle that, because it started to click. And I was like, oh, this is the language of creation. And if I weave this code into what I do, then maybe heaven will take notice, and I can change my situation, because I wasn't very happy with my life situation at that point. I had left Microsoft the year before. The work I'd found since then was not so great. And of course, the situation with my wife wasn't so great. And a number of other things that happened that weren't so great at that time. And
I can understand. Yeah.
yeah. So I was like, okay, how can I apply this 369 pattern in a real way? And so what I came up with was this manifestation work. I don't know exactly how or why I thought of this when I did, because I had no experience in this arena at that time, but it just kind of came to me somewhat naturally. So I found, or decided for myself, I was going to take 6 statements that I wanted to affirm for myself as true. One was like, I am free from all debts. Things like that. And I took these statements and I wrote each statement on 9 sheets of paper, 33 times on each sheet of paper. This is a lot of writing. My hand hurt.
I can imagine, man. That's a lot. That's quite a bit of.
Yeah.
It reminds me of Bart Simpson when he was writing on the chalkboard over and over and over again. Yeah.
So I wrote it, 33 times on 9 pages each for each statement. So 6 of these. So and then I took each collection of statements, I folded them 6 times. I looked up the gematria for each statement. Some of them were quite interesting. I can manifest so easily. I pulled that out of thin air. Turns out the gematria for that is 999, which is the code for abundance.
So,
yeah,
that's no coincidence, man. I think you channeled something right there.
Absolutely. And then, of course, my first statement was, I am the Archangel Samael, first among archangels. The gematria for that is 1133. That's how I got the angel number 1133. And also, as I was working on that statement, that's when I randomly found the site that had the writings of Samael Ein Bior and read. So it's like there's another level of why that was so weird when I found it, right?
That's definitely synchronicities, man. Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, I took each of the statements, I folded them, I wrote the statement on front, I drew the angel symbol of Samael on the front, and I wrote the gematria code on the front. And then I put a silver coin into each statement. I built like a little makeshift altar using like a disposable styrofoam cooler. I just had that in my bathroom, and I put the statements on there, and I bathed them in like high frequency tones for several days. And then after that was done, I think it was around September 9th at that point. I took the statements and.
Funny how it was the 9th too. That's very.
Yeah.
9-9. Wow, man, you were like hitting home runs. Keep going. Yeah.
I do a lot of things like exactly the way I'm supposed to, not knowing what I'm doing half the time. So I don't know how that happens. I guess it's just soul memory or something. I don't know. But yeah. So then I lit my candle, and I read the statements aloud. It was 3 times each, and I did that every day for as often as I remembered to do it. And so a couple things came from that. One, during this time, I was really fearful for my wife that she was not going to survive. because people were dying from the effects of the vax, and then she was not herself. So I had it out with God, and I was like, she deserves another chance, and she's gonna get one. This is not fair. Like, she didn't know what was gonna happen. She didn't do it on purpose, and she gets another chance. And I received my sign that I was heard, and that she was gonna get her second chance. And that's when I tell people, I ripped a hole in time and space to save my wife.
Yeah.
And and so that was definitely not the end of our struggle, but it was the beginning of things changing. So let's see where. So
well, the one thing I want to say real quick, because I know she's watching, Mrs. Lyon, you got yourself a damn fine man for a husband, man. He is a quality person. You are a lucky woman, man. And no, that definitely, it's interesting. I've noticed this correlation between people who get the vax, and I've noticed that it almost alters and changes their behavior.
What it seems to do is it somehow it kills their connection to their soul. So not in every case, because not everyone got the same shot and not everyone's affected the same, but for those who are affected, it's like they can't feel their soul, they can't feel God. And for Sarah, that was a hard thing for a long time. Like, I kept trying to talk to her about ascension and just all these spiritual things that I learned, and it was like she couldn't understand it. She couldn't, no matter how hard she tried. And now, only recently, it's almost like she's back, finally. And now it's like, oh, that makes total sense. That's so easy. Why didn't I understand that before? So it's quite strange.
Oh, absolutely, man. And like, the whole situation that unfolded during that time was just so profoundly strange. I mean, it was plastered with red flags from the get-go. And it's almost as if, I don't know. I mean, since you're a TV and a movie buff, you probably saw the new Black Mirror season, the one that just came out.
I canceled Netflix a long time ago.
You did. Okay, so the one thing I would tell you to check out, because of the predictive programming and the symbolism in it, check out the Black Mirror episode, Joan is Awful. Okay. And if you just watched one of them, that would be the one, because they talk about how they have this quantum computer that's creating these different simulated realities. And in these different simulated realities, they have to keep people in a state of mesmerized terror. Yeah. And that just even kind of reflects, when I saw that, I thought all about 2020, and I'm like, this could be a tell-all, man. And, it's just so bizarre. But the other thing I want to touch base with you on, I mean, the strangeness of the chief of medicine Skype calling you in your fucking hospital bed. Like, I cannot, like, that made my jaw drop, man, because I cannot think of anybody I would know who has ever experienced something like that. And I almost feel like in some ways you could have potentially been being gang stalked a little. I don't know how you feel.
Oh yeah. I mean, I do feel like I have been gang stalked at different times. There, at different times in my life, there's always been like people who just seem unusually interested in what I'm doing. They're not always friendly. In fact, oftentimes they're not. And so it's like, okay, if you don't like me, then go away. but they don't do that. So, I don't know what is up with that, but I do know, I have heard that, CIA and people, they are watching for people like us. They know who we are, they know where we are, and they have people trailing us. And, there are definitely things from my childhood that would lead me to believe that's true. I used to be visited by alien grays at night. They never did anything to me that I can remember, but I just remember them coming in my room, taking me out into the yard at night and having conversations with me about something, stuff like that.
That's so strange. So how many of these experiences did you have with the Grays? Because you're not the first person I've spoken to who has had these experiences with the Grays in their childhood. Like, was that like the bulk of the experiences, or
there's four that I can think of distinctly. Two, I was in my room at night asleep, and I had hard floors on my bedroom floor. So if someone walked in the room with shoes, it made noise. So I heard the footsteps. I heard someone walk into my room, and I sat up, and for an instant, I saw somebody short, maybe about 4 feet tall, just standing there for an instant, and then they were gone. And then maybe like 2 weeks later, that happened again. And then there's just a few like times I remember having these dreams where I would either be like outside talking to them, or I would be outside walking, and I would look over into, like, we had this big field, and I would look over into the field, and there was a spaceship, like a big one. And that's the memories that I have of that.
That's so, man. There's a lot of us. We all share that similar story. We've all had some kind of, especially all of us who are on this wavelength and in this frequency, we've all had some kind of very strange experiences as children. And like, you've just kind of like summed up, because I've been trying to find, because just what you were talking about, like the monitoring, the being monitored from a young age, potentially, having these CIA individuals, these intelligence individuals, basically monitor you and follow you around. So this is something I've seen a constituent with everybody in our community. I mean, so let me ask you this: what do you think that there's potentially some kind of secret program that we have not become aware of yet? Because I remember when you posted that video about the star seeds and how the CIA has documentation on star seeds.
Oh yeah.
Do you feel it goes much deeper than that? And if so, I mean, how deep do you think it goes?
Very deep. So, yeah. So, are you familiar with Mr. Truth Bomb? Have you ever seen any of his videos?
I have not.
I'll point you to some of them after this. But
awesome.
He does a great documentary on MK Ultra, probably the best one that there is, to be honest. And in that, he talks about a cult called the Finders, and this was a CIA cult that had its peak in the 1980s, and I've seen interviews with them. Why did they call themselves the Finders? Because they were trying to find gifted children. They were trying to find starseed children. So, and do something with them, raise them their way. I mean, CIA wanted people like us because, they wanted to turn us into weapons. So, or just control us, So, all of that was definitely going on. In fact, I have a really good friend who, I didn't know this. When she told me about her childhood, I didn't know about any of this stuff. And then when I started learning about MK Ultra, I started thinking about the stories she told me. And I was like, whoa, she was definitely in the MK Ultra program, because her dad was in the CIA, and she would talk about how like they made her go to all these like Air Force training programs, where she had to like do ESP powers and stuff, and a lot of other crazy stories. Yeah.
That is, man. Well, because like we were talking about the GATE program last week, and this is now opening up. See, I called that the first piece of a much larger puzzle, And now it looks like we're starting to get the second piece now. It's insane. So the finders, the CIA, did you, so while I got you here, did you ever experience anything like that when you were a child? Did you ever get taken to any kind of like, gifted testing or anything like that?
I mean, yeah, I was the gifted and talented program, in the school I was going to. We lived in Connecticut then, and there it was called Peak, P-E-A-K, and I was in that from first to fourth grade. So yeah, there was that.
And that's bizarre, man. It's becoming more apparent. It's almost, I feel like, the I call it the layers of forgetting as we kind of move forward with this. It's like the layers of forgetting start just dissipating,
Yeah,
from each
well,
of
that's interesting because I feel like as a species, we've almost had some kind of a collective amnesia because,
absolutely.
Like a lot of these things that have become so real to me in the last few years, my spiritual awakening and all the things that I've learned, I inherited as a child a bunch of books from my dad when he was, a teenager. And they talked about all the same stuff. He was reading about all that stuff back then. People knew about this stuff a long time ago. And it's almost like we just forgot. And like, how did that happen? Why did that happen? I don't know.
Have you entertained the thought? I believe that it was an agreed upon aspect of this existence, but there was some kind of a sleight of hand involved, and that's kind of what I've gotten. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts too.
Yeah. So as far as what goes on planet Earth, I mean, here's what I've been told about it: is that basically, this whole place, people say it's a matrix or it's a simulation, and and there's simulations within the simulation. But what I'm talking about is the simulation of Earth. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and people are like, oh, is it a simulation? Is it a computer program? Well, I mean, it might have similarities to it, but we're taught from birth that we're created by an intelligent creator. So why would we be astonished to discover that we live in a world that has, observable intelligent systems running it? That does almost seem like a simulation. I mean, why wouldn't you do that? So what it really is, what this is, I call it the engine of creation. This is where souls come to be born, but we're not supposed to stay baby souls. We're supposed to grow up. We're supposed to become more than we are. We're supposed to join the celestial community as mature, responsible beings who don't stab each other in the back, who do the right thing without being made to do it. And that's what it takes, to if you want to leave Earth, that's what it takes. You have to learn how to, not to not to use a horrible bumper sticker, but you have to learn how to coexist. You have to learn how to uh, be godly, or else you're not leaving. And that's just the way it is.
100%, man, and that's why, like, and I'll pick your brain on this because I think there's a lot of people when we talk about topics like this, I don't know if it's human nature or human psychology or it's potentially just the energies involved at this point in time, but it always seems like we strive to one end of the polarity spectrum. There's a lot of people who think that the reincarnation cycle and samsara is a necessary thing for learning and to mature as a spiritual being. And then there's the other realm of the other side of the polarity spectrum where people think it's a trap, like that the reincarnation. I've come to find that you have to learn it's a trap. I think, or remember it's a trap.
Well,
I mean, what are your thoughts on
wasn't
that?
supposed to be a trap. Okay, here's
Yeah.
what happened. Here's what happened. Okay. I mean, I don't know exactly when this happened, but somewhere along the way, I don't know how or why, but those awful alpha draconians came in, I don't know how this happened. I don't really understand it, but somehow, they signed some kind of a soul contract for the earth. Basically, it's like, oh, we'll be the caretakers of earth. We'll be the caretakers of humanity. We'll shepherd them. We'll do this. We'll do that. And basically, they are master manipulators of the law. So when they sign a soul contract, they stretch it beyond the limit. They have stretched it beyond the limit. They violated the contract. That's why we can fight them now. But essentially, it was hijacked and turned into a soul trap. Souls come here and they don't leave. The dark entities that have ruled here want us here because, number one, they want to feed on us. Number two, they hate God, so they don't want more of God's children ascending and rising into heaven, because that makes them weaker.
Absolutely no. And the one I've gotten that message. So I've had experiences with these entities. And one of the messages I got, because I asked them, I was like, why is it that you dislike, what I do and what I'm trying to achieve here? And the response was, we don't care if a few of you ascend, but we can't have all of you ascend. And that was basically the response that I got. So what you're saying is definitely resonating, man. I think like just we were talking about, there was some kind of sleight of hand that took place. There was some kind of some kind of flick of the wrist or something that basically ended us up in it. And the one perspective, and I actually want to pick your brain on this because you talked about this monitoring equipment. And I know you're somewhat of a shaman, as we're getting into this. So in any of your experiences with entheogens, did you ever have the experience of a piece of equipment monitoring you or something? Because I know a lot of people who have had this experience, and you bringing that up made me think of that. So I'm just curious to hear what your thoughts are.
Oh yeah. But so this is another aspect that I haven't really touched on, okay? Because people talk about God, angels, devils, aliens, okay? These are all just different words for similar things, okay? Mm-hmm. So some people, you tell them that, it's like, oh, blasphemy. I mean, really? I mean, why is it blasphemy to say an angel could come from another world or another dimension? They come from somewhere, right? Why not name it? Why not talk about it? So my star system of origin is Arcturus. I'm an Arcturian starseed. My higher self, again, who is the Archangel Samael, he actually comes from 9 billion years in the future. By the way, that's when the universe is created, by the way. It's not created in the past. It's created in the future.
I want to get to this after that. I'm gonna hold that thought because dude, we're on the same wavelength. Hold on. But no, keep going.
So early on, what I mentioned before, I had, kind of a Kundalini awakening in 2022. And around that time, I started talking to a spiritual guide who's become a very, very dear friend of mine. She's like a sister now. Her name's Sandra.
Very cool.
And she helped me through a lot of things. And the first time I met her, she put me in contact with the Arcturians. She's like, oh, there's something wrong with your crown chakra. So what we're going to do is the Arcturians are going to have a look at you, and they're going to see if they can figure out what's wrong with your crown chakra. And then between you and them, hopefully they'll be able to fix it. So I was like, oh, okay, at this point I'm still kind of not knowing if any of this is even real, or knowing what to expect. But the following Saturday or Sunday, I took a nap on the couch, and it happened. I fell asleep and I saw myself on their ship, and it was I mean, just imagine like Star Trek: The Next Generation, but even way more, if you can, even way more high tech than that. And it
Mm-hmm.
was all like, I don't know, glossy or glossless, but shiny, like silver, everything, like the beds, the furniture, everything, and just like, I don't know, smooth, like almost like it had been poured. I don't know.
Very
And I
smooth.
saw myself on like a med bed that they had in there, and they were examining me. And then afterwards, a voice said to me, "Oh, it's done. It worked." And so yeah, so that was experience one, and then a couple months later, um, I was so yeah, I was on like this message board on Telegram, and there are these people. I'm sure you've run into them. I know you have, where like they claim to be Christians, but I don't think they are. They get very very aggressive with anyone who speaks something that's not allowed, like, oh, I'm an angel, or oh, we're all God's children, or anything like that. And it's almost like Westboro Baptist kind of energy, where they will just get really super aggressive. Um, and definitely not. There's no love of Christ in there. Like a kind word turneth away wrath. But I think they missed that verse.
Oh,
But
I've absolutely dealt with those
yeah.
people before because I'm a huge believer. I talk about the pre-Nicene text, the interlinear texts, and things like that. And I was on X actually, and I was talking to this Christian person, and I asked them about it, and somebody came in, this guy that wasn't even part of the conversation, and immediately just started calling me a Pharisee for asking about this, for like, how dare you, like, blah blah blah, and things like that. No, I've most certainly dealt with them, so I understand.
Yeah. Yeah. And the funny thing is, like I know the Bible pretty well. Maybe not. I may not have the whole thing memorized, but when I need a passage, it comes to my mind, and I know where to find it. Um, so with there was this one particular person on this message board, and like I I started challenging them. I was like, and what I found very quickly is that they didn't know anything about the Bible. They were completely faking it,
Mm-hmm.
and but yet somehow they were still like they were still very popular in that group. Like nobody else could see through them except me. Felt like, and but it felt like the more I battled this person, like the worse it got. I wasn't gaining any ground by battling them with reason and logic, because they weren't there for reason and logic. They were there to sow chaos. And so around this time, I went to sleep one night, and I was back on the Arcturian spaceship, and this time they hooked me up to like a device that was on their ship, and I think Edgar Casey talked about them having this capability. I just read that like yesterday, but
Awesome.
but they had like this. It's almost like they could create their own simulation of Earth, if you will, there on the ship, and they had human souls in it. Human souls that, like, people who were heavily programmed, people that were like this person, or like the person you described, that just get very violent if you try to talk to them. And they had me like run experiments where like I was trying to reach these people to see, because this is the Great Awakening, right? We're here to awaken humanity, so let's see what we have to do to awaken them. And what we found was that nothing that we tried could reach these people, because they were so heavily programmed. And there's almost like a root program in the MK Ultra programming, that it's like, if they realize that they are um, dealing with basically someone who has the spirit of Christ within them,
Mm-hmm.
They immediately like they become antagonistic to that.
Mm-hmm.
They and there is no getting over it. There's no getting past it. So literally, we, star seeds, angels, Christed beings, we can't reach these people. And the Arcturians basically what we concluded is that, probably this is probably about 80% of the current population. It could now this was like a year and a half ago. So it's possible that they found better methods for reaching people since then, but yeah, that was the case at the time.
That's so, man. Another thing too, I want to run by you because I've experienced this. Now I definitely agree with you. I do think that a lot of these cases are definitely the programming is just so deep. There's that programming to be antagonistic towards the Christ energy or the spirit of Christ if they sense it within somebody. I'm going to run this one by you too. I do feel, and I have experienced, that there are things here that pose as humans that are not.
Oh, yeah.
And I do think that potentially those into, because I've dealt with some of that too, and I think I've had
I have
a.
a very frightening story about
Let's talk about it. No, dude, I love this. Let's talk about it.
Okay,
Let's.
so
I
this
want. I want
one-
to hear this.
Okay, this, I mentioned earlier that before my awakening, I did some things I shouldn't have done. Okay, so
We all did. It's
we all,
okay.
we all make mistakes. So, so this one, there's a horror movie about this. There literally is. I can tell you the movie, but so I used to go get haircuts, at this place in Charlotte, and I went there for like 5 years, and I was pretty friendly with the the woman who cut my hair, and things were a little estranged with my wife and I. I wasn't seeking a extramarital relationship. I just, I've always connected with women. Like
Mhm.
I'm friends with them, and so I just asked her to lunch one day. In hindsight, I shouldn't have done that, but it happened, and um, things just got weird immediately. I won't go into too many details here, but long story short, my friend who I mentioned earlier that had been MK Ultra, she messaged me out of the blue a few days after this began, and she's like, "I know that you have a problem. Like this person that's in your life. I don't even know how she knew. This person that's in your life, she's not good. She's like, she's a demon. She's a succubus. You need to get away from her."
What the
And
fuck?
yeah, and yeah, it was like that. I mean, no, it was scary. It was, I mean, honestly, it felt almost like a male version of being raped in a way. Like if that's possible. Like because it's almost like she got in my head and like kind of glamored me. So like when I was around her, I felt like I was in love. And when I was away from her, I would start to come into my senses a little and be like, wait, this isn't, something's not right here. And eventually she started getting like aggressive, mean. Um, she One day I made myself a sandwich at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and she messaged me right at that moment, and she's like, "What are you eating?" How weird is that?
What the
Yeah,
fuck, man?
yeah.
There's no explaining that away at
Yeah,
that point. That's yeah.
and she was messaging me like constantly and never had a chance to even collect my thoughts. And vampires, psychic vampires, that's what they do. Like, and I've talked to other people who are in this situation. They don't leave you alone, and there's a reason for that, because when you're alone, as Tesla said, that's when you can think. That's when you have ideas, and they don't want you to think. They don't want you to have ideas. They want you stuck reacting to their energy until they're done with you. And if she had the opportunity to be done with me, I mean, we probably wouldn't be here right now. But the other funny thing about her is, again, I hadn't recovered my past life memories yet. I mean, I knew about the Samael thing, but I didn't really understand what it really meant. and she knew who I was because she joked about it. Like she teased me. She called me King David, which yes, I am a reincarnation of King David. She called me that, and she teased me about it. And I didn't think that much of it at the time until later. Like when I started to learn these things, I was like, wow. So at the end of that 3 weeks, I finally found the strength to cut it off. And my friend Carrie, she told me, you need to perform this candle magic ritual. It's called the ritual of cord cutting. You have to sever the energy, or else, she'll come back, because demons only require, the implication of consent. And so that was like my first introduction to candle magic. I went on Etsy. I found a shop that sold a kit. I bought it. I bought the cord cutting kit. I prayed. I prayed really hard, and then I performed the ritual. And as soon as it was done, I felt 50 pounds lighter, physically 50 pounds lighter.
Wow.
Yeah. But here's where it gets even crazier, okay? Because 1 year later, after that occurred, I found this movie on Amazon. It's called Serpent's Lair. It's from 1995. It's kind of an old, obscure horror movie. And it's about this exact situation. Like the succubus, she acts the same way. The main character said some of the same dialogue that I said. I mean, it's like I was watching the adaptation of what I lived through. The Samael is even in that movie.
That's so fucking weird, man.
Yeah. It was.
I've known people who've had similar experiences too, and that just like rings so true with what you're saying. That I forgot who it was I was talking to, a friend of mine, that they had an incident in this house they used to live in Connecticut. And they ended up moving, but they were watching a movie 2 years later, and in that movie was the house in Connecticut. Yeah. And it was the same fucking thing that happened to him and his wife too, dude. I was like, dude, you can't make this shit up. Like there's some kind of weird nature. Real quick, I wanted to ask you about this real fast, because you brought it up, and this is something that's been, the one thing about our community, as much as I love our community, they are not ready for some of the revelations sometimes. And, you were talking about 9 billion years into the future with Samael.
Yes.
Now, there is a theory that the future and the past are one and the same. And the reason why I said, there was a thing where I saw the Kali Yuga, the Yuga cycle chart. And the arrow, basically, it came from 12,000 BC, went around the Yuga cycle, and then went back to 12,000 BC. And then I found that just to be very, very interesting. I was like, okay, so I kind of took a look at it. And there's a lot of talk that basically what we're undergoing right now is a projection from the future. Or it could potentially be what are your thoughts on that? Because I found that so profoundly interesting. You brought that up. Not a lot of people talk about this.
Yeah. So I received something about this like last week, and it's almost like we keep going around time in like this loop almost, because like I said, the universe is actually created, 9.5 billion years in the future, the act of creation, and somehow the seed is planted, however far in the past, and then the universe grows to its perfect state 9 billion years in the future. But here's the thing, it's almost like every time we get to that point, it's like, it also continues moving forward, but there's also something that loops back around and starts over and goes through it again. And every time we go through that loop, we do it a little bit better. So this is not the first time we've been here.
Not the first time we've hit this timeline. Exactly. I've heard that. And that's also another potential theory. I mean, I'm sure you've heard of the looking glass. The whole looking glass thing.
I was looking at all my looking glass notes today. I was going through. I spent yesterday and today going through all the notes and information that I've collected over the past several years, just so that I would make sure that I was prepared for any question. And I'm quite familiar with Looking Glass.
So this even ties into what we were talking about. What you just said about this is not the first time we've attempted this timeline, and then also to the monitoring of us. And what do you think potentially? Yes, I know we've talked about the finders, but what if potentially these beings or these secret societies and intelligence agencies have looked through this and seen what we've tried to do or tried to accomplish in these previous timelines, and it's almost as if like that could be. What do you think about that? I've always found that theory very interesting.
According to I forget the guy's name, but the there's one particular whistleblower on Looking Glass who has provided the most information, and what he said basically is after a certain point in time, Looking Glass stopped working for them because it used to allow them to see like alternate timelines. Like if I go left instead of right, well, they can look and see what the left and the right timelines are, so they can prepare for either. And that's how you end up with like the Simpsons and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But what he said was that after 2012, the timelines started to converge, and they could only see like one or two timelines, no matter what they did. And the timeline was always, humanity awakens, God wins. And so, as far as I know, Looking Glass is useless to them at this point.
Okay. No, that's good to know. That's good to know, because that has always been, floating around with that. And of course, we're always pitching theories here and there. We're always trying to, talk about this stuff and kind of figure out what's going on. But the fact that you were talking about that, because that's not the 9 billion, the future tense of the universe, on how a lot of this stuff and a lot of what we experience could technically be coming from the future. Yeah. And that's something not a lot of people are talking about. And I commend you for kind of going down that road, because it's a very interesting concept.
Well, and if you're talking about beings like the Arcturians, okay, like to us, they are 9 billion years in the future. To them, we're accessible. I mean, they are native to the 9th through 12th dimensions. They're so far beyond what we could even imagine. They're so far beyond what most extraterrestrials we can imagine could imagine. Like they are one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. I forget where else I was going with that. Oh, no. The thing is, okay, yeah, see, they exist outside of time. So yeah, it's 9 billion years in the future to us, but to them, time is nothing at all. So that's, if that makes sense at all.
No, absolutely. I've always felt that our perspective of time and how we perceive it as being linear is just something strictly related to the third density.
It is. Some people in the spiritual community, they like to say, "Oh, time doesn't exist." I feel like it's disrespectful to say that to the people who live here, to us. That, I mean, time's pretty real to us. There's nothing we can do about it. So just to say time doesn't exist, I mean, how is that helpful? It does exist. It does exist here. It may not exist above us, and that's good, but it's still something that we have to deal with here.
Oh, 100%, man. A lot of the, and that's why, a lot of the spiritual community, when we talk about stuff like this, it's almost as if like, and it's not all of the spiritual community. It seems to be, and I find this to be dangerous, and I'll pick your thoughts on this too. It seems like a lot of, the ones who kind of subscribe to what I would call the super new age stuff, they kind of reject their humanity a little bit. They kind of reject. They're like, oh, I don't want to be in this human existence anymore, or oh, time doesn't exist, or oh, things like this. But like, dude, you chose to come here and be a human.
Exactly. It's like your spirit created your ego. It did it for a reason. It's not so that you can discard it. Yes, you do have to kill your ego, but he doesn't stay dead. He rises from the dead every time. You must die to yourself and come alive again, and you have to do it as many times as it takes. um and this is not new. Like, Buddha taught about this in his first sermon, the middle path. I just heard it a couple weeks ago. It was such an honor, actually, to be included on that. But
I think that.
Yeah, there's a spirit realm, but you also have to be realistic and acknowledge the present state. We're here on Earth, here and now, and it's not for no reason. We're here to do something.
Absolutely. I would 100% agree. And I think, and that's where I, since this is something we're going to talk about, the balance between Christ and Lucifer. I think in that aspect. So, when we talk about the Lucifer energy and things like that, it's about that, awakening. It's about, kind of looking at things and understanding what's really going on and seeing it for what it is. But when you engross yourself in it and you get out of balance with it, that's when you start to see those kind of effects happen in a person. They want to reject their physicality. They want to reject all of this stuff from, the third density world. And I think, well, number one, too, you'll probably agree with me. Humans are very special. We ourselves, at least in my opinion, are not from here. So like they can take that. Actually, let me get your opinion on that. What is your opinion on that? Do you think we potentially originated here, or did we come from higher realms?
I don't know. They say that the asteroid belt used to be another planet called Tiamat, and some people say that that's actually the birthplace of humanity. I don't know. It's possible. Some people say that the Garden of Eden wasn't here. It was on another world, and sometime between then and maybe Noah's flood or something else, we were brought here. And some people say no, that was here, and I don't know, but I do know this. Okay, here's something like the human body basically is created to be an avatar for God. So, like, for God to exist in a physical form, and not just God, but God's children. Like, he wants more like him, and that can only happen in this realm. This is the only place where we can learn how to exist at that level. And so if we deny our ego, like, completely, if we deny our existence, we're not accomplishing that. We're basically, it's all for nothing.
I completely agree, and I think you hit the point home pretty hard on that, and it is. I mean, there's a lot of different speculations when we talk about the origins of humanity. The one thing I think we can both concretely, accept and look forward with is, we are essentially the divine consciousness in its different subjective focal points. These bodies are that. And I think that's a beautiful thing. I don't know why you would want to reject that. Like, it's like I don't know why, but that's
yeah. It's something in that programming. It's like, so I call it, well, the opposite of it, I call main character energy, right? Where it's like, oh, yeah, I'm the main character of my story. For whatever reason, there's a lot of people that aren't capable of that, or haven't. I don't know. They're always living vicariously through other people, celebrities, or just anything. They're not trying to, be their best self. They're just worried about somebody else. And yeah, I don't. I think it's just it's just something that they've done to us as a people, I think.
I would completely agree with you, man. You and I have talked about this before, the external savior syndrome.
Yes.
Looking outside of yourself to for saving, for good nature, or good luck, or things like that. And it's right. It is. I do think it has something to do with the MK Ultra programming, or it has to do with essentially some kind of programming that either took place around that time, or potentially it could have started from the very beginning. I mean, when we look at all of these different organized religions that strip you of your power and make you think that God is something external of you, that you have to, it makes it existential, not esoteric. And but the number one thing I'm going to say is like what would be I guess, like, if we got to like break it down like this, what would be your advice to somebody, or what would you say to somebody who is still suffering from this external savior syndrome? And, like, how would you relate to them that there's a better way, I guess is the best way I'm going to put it.
Well, I like to go back to the story of Moses because, people like to look at stories like yours and mine, and if they haven't been through it, they say, oh, it's crazy, it's just a dream. But then they'll turn around and go to church and listen to the story of Moses on Sunday school. I'll tell you right now, Moses had a DMT trip. He did. I mean, obviously, he obviously did. In fact, the burning bush is like, it's traditionally known that was an acacia tree, which acacia bark is where we get DMT from. So when God spoke to Moses, he didn't say, he commanded Moses to go challenge a god. Pharaoh on earth was a god in the eyes of the Egyptians. And here comes this burning bush. It's like, oh, go challenge that god. And Moses says, well, who should I say sent me to challenge this god? He said, tell him I am sent you. Well, you can't say I am without saying I am, right? I mean, God literally told Moses to say, I am. I have the authority to tell you this. And
yes.
So like, so why Moses and not you? Because I believe that every one of us is going to get that burning bush moment sooner or later in our lives. And it's up to us to decide what we're going to do with it.
And I love that, man. And speaking of this reference, before we start winding down, you were talking about the acacia bush. When Moses had them walking around, or they were circumambulating the mountain, I believe, as they were trekking through the desert, that God had them eat the manna. And there's a lot of people who theorize and speculate that the manna could have potentially been psilocybin mushrooms, because it was stated that it depended on the individual, what would happen when they ingested the manna. And I mean, we kind of look towards, modern day entheogens, and we can take that very same analogy and be like, yeah, it depends on the individual. Like when they take this, what happens? I mean,
that's quite true. Well, did it make them feel sick?
No. So the one thing I'll tell you, man, is in my research, I've been cracking down. And I'll get your opinion on this. So I did when I did the show on the tesseract in these cathedrals and how they use cruciform. It's like some kind of technology building this way, or like an old form of technology. In a lot of these cathedrals, like very old, ancient Gothic cathedrals in France, there was photos of Jesus portrayed next to psilocybin mushrooms, and that Jesus was, and also too, the Last Supper was a supper of mushrooms, and that kind of gives way to the expressions on the faces of Jesus and his disciples during that painting. I found that just to be too like it just resonates. It resonates because
I have had a kind of a vision of like Jesus, like when he's at the Garden of Gethsemane. I kind of have a vision of him maybe consuming some mushrooms at that point. And also, like I was also the angel that tested him in the wilderness. I had a memory of this, and it wasn't. It was not an adversarial thing at all. It was, all Christed beings have to be tested in this way.
100%, and I agree with that.
Yeah. So that when when Jesus was tested, it was a test of his body, his mind, and his spirit. And you can see all three tests. The one, create some food. The other, what was it? It was like, bow down to me and I'll give you all the riches in the world. And, he's appealing to his ego. And the third one was, he was appealing to his will to live, apparently. Or, jump off the cliff and, let's see if your father sends an angel to save you, and which, he probably would have died, because these gifts, they don't just work anytime. They have to be used in the right way.
100% agreed. And I find that, and let's dive into this just real quickly, because there's that a lot of people, when we look at stories like this, especially when we talk about Christ being tested in the desert for those 40 days and those 40 nights, he had to be tested. This is the thing is there's I call it the the blissful, the bliss ninny syndrome, almost, is kind of like the way I call it. It's like there's a group of people that thinks we should have never left the Garden of Eden. We should have just stayed there. We should have just been, really, we should have never left. We should have never eaten from a tree, but this is the thing. Humanity needs to be tested in order to evolve, in order to grow.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big problem right now. Like, everyone wants God or Jesus to come in and save us. And, God could certainly come in and save the world from Satan if he wanted to. It's happened before, and it doesn't work. Here's why. Because God can save the world from Satan, but he can't save humanity from themselves. Mm-hmm. Only humanity can do that.
And you're absolutely right, man. I think, and that's even just, what we were talking about and what I talked about in my, Tale of Two Creations. There's a reciprocating relationship between, Samael, Jesus, things like this, because, through the tests and the trials that we face as human beings, whether on a subjective level or on a collective level, through those tests and trials, we awaken. And we awaken and we get it's like, and this is what I'm saying. And like, that's I'm surprised. Like, and again, I do think that there's, of course, we got the fundamentalist indoctrination involved when we're talking about these kind of topics, but like, it's a beautiful relationship when you look at it that way, because through the trials and through the tests, we awaken. And we awaken to that divine spark within us and to the Christ within us. And it's like, it's almost like this reciprocating Ouroboros relationship. I find it just so fascinating.
Yeah. It's been pretty interesting, like every time I heal from some childhood trauma or something, I feel like my awareness grows, my power to manifest grows, which I haven't talked about that much, but when I say things, they happen. And awesome. When at first, it was kind of like a little bit scary. It still is a little bit, because like I don't know what I'm gonna manifest sometimes, and I have to be very careful with my words. But yeah. So
I know, man. I'm with you, man. It's the, and you just brought up a really cool point, because like what we speak into existence. We speak those frequencies, and you just have this special connection that you have fostered and you've cultivated, through the work that you've done and the research that you've done that enables you to just be really good at that. And I find that really fascinating.
And I do have to call out here, like if someone wants to know more about this, how to have the power of manifestation in their life, read Saint Germain, the I Am Discourses of Saint Germain. It's the most powerful book I've ever read. It's, a lot of people may not know who Saint Germain is. He's the patron saint of America. Like he is the one who's going to help us heal this country. And he's been around a lot in history. He's
theorized to be immortal. Yeah,
he is immortal because he's an ascended being, like Jesus. He's ascended. But he's been the prophet Samuel. He's been the wizard Merlin. Like these are all manifestations of Saint Germain. That's the kind of wisdom that you're dealing with. And the I am discourses of Saint Germain will teach you how to speak the words of power like Jesus did, without shame. Jesus said, such things as I have done and greater you shall do in my Father's name. His Father's name is I am. So I mean, we're commanded to do it. And you know, you've seen my prayer on that I share on Twitter, the prayer for the perfection of divine justice.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Saint Germain taught me that. And it is a very powerful prayer, because it's basically like, you know, you're praying for the scales to be balanced. There's been an injustice done, and we're asking for the perfect realignment from God's perspective to set things right. And it's going to happen.
I completely agree. And I think, you know, to sum all of this up, man, I think right now, I completely agree with you. We are on the best possible timeline we possibly can be on. We have absolutely nothing to fear as long as we do right by ourselves, our loved ones, and fellow humanity. And there's going to be some very weird things that are going to occur. And that, you know, that this existence is beautiful. The human existence is beautiful. We should not refute it. We should not reject it. I mean, we are essentially the divine in the flesh. And I think that's just such a beautiful thing. And your story, man, let me tell you what, David, you're a strong guy. All right. I commend you for everything you've been through and coming out and helping the world heal, dude. And like, I think that's a testament to the individual that you are, where you've come from, and where your head and your heart is, man. And like, and you know, thank you for everything you've done. And I just want you to know that. Yeah, man, after hearing your story, bro, like I gotta say, you were one strong dude. I don't know a lot of people who could have made it out of that.
Well, thanks. There's I don't know when to quit, I guess. You know,
that's all of us, man. Yeah. We don't die. And it's like, you know, and that's why, like, really, when we think about it, there's really nothing they can do to us. They could try to do whatever they want, but we're just going to keep coming back. It's never
exactly. We can't be stopped.
We cannot. Well, you know, David, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you? I still, guys, have David's game in the bottom of the Rumble description. So if you want to help David out, go out and check out his game.
Yeah. Especially since my contract at Microsoft is not being renewed after July 1st, I'm going to have to find another means of securing income here real soon. So, I mean, I really, well, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out something that I can do, like that's not in big tech, that's, you know, related to this. So, but you know, if that game happens to like go viral or something, that might help me out a little bit. So, hey, we'll see. But yeah, my game is Hunt the Muglump, and it's a puzzle game. It's like a 2D retro style game, like Super Nintendo style. My son loves it. I mean, I think it's a pretty fun game. You know, it's not Halo, but it's you know, it'll entertain you for a little bit. So yeah, please do check it out if you get a chance. And then I am most active on Twitter or X. My profile is the Lion KD 369, and I post regularly. I talk about hopeful visions of the future. You know, I have a very hopeful vision of the future. I've seen how this ends, and it's not bad. It's good. It's very good. But there's some bad that we have to get through first. And honestly, we've already been through quite a bit of it. There's not much left. We're almost there.
And that's why I enjoy you, man. You're positively optimistic. You're not sitting there like a lot of these other people. And this is something I talk about on this show quite a bit. And you're not sitting there like a lot of these other people. And I'm not sitting here like a lot of other podcasters. bitching and moaning and arguing and yelling and, screaming into an echo chamber. We're already all well aware of what the problems are. We already know what the situation that we're looking at before us. And the fact that you're bringing a solution based perspective to the table in what you do, I think is highly refreshing. And I think we need more of this. And, and props to you, man. And I think that's why we're comrades, man. You bring that, you bring that positively optimistic, you bring that solution-based mindset to the table. And that's what we need right now. And I think, you and I keep working together, man. I definitely want to have you on for a round 2 in the future. Yeah, to check up on everything for sure. And we're going to keep just hammering it, man. Our collective energy combined, our community and this collective energy combined, we have what it takes to help shift. And we have what it takes to help, even if people don't become aware of the full situation just yet, we can help push them towards better habits in their lives. We can help be those examples, to help maybe foster and cultivate a future awakening of that divine spark. Well, David, I want you to hang out for just a second.
Okay.
When we get off here, we're going to chat for a sec. Guys, I will be back next week. My guests next week, I will be having Heidi from I got the podcast name. I don't remember off the top of my head, but this lady Heidi, she does her own podcast. She's going to be coming on to talk about the occult stuff in Mormonism. And which I didn't know that Mormonism had a occult side to it, but this is something we're going to be digging into next week.
All religions do.
Oh man, I think you're gonna like that one. I was actually pleasantly surprised to hear about that. I think it's going to be a very interesting conversation. Everybody in the chat, from Mrs. Lyon to Dawn and Spinja and Urban, thanks for being here tonight, guys. I really appreciate it. And guys, I will catch you next week. Thank you again, BG-Cast fam, for joining me for another BG-Cast Wednesday live podcast. I will see you guys same time next week. Y'all have a great night.